everybody into Mini CEE series. I made David put his Wizard of Oz background on because I really, really like it. But I think we're good, David. What do you think?
All right. Well, I did acquiesce to Sue's request, but I'm going to change it to a little some less distracting. But hello, everybody. Welcome to our next Mini CEE presentation. And if the rapid sign up that filled every available slot is any indication, you are in for a treat. Now, I have a prepared bio. We're not going that route. Sue is she's married to Patrick. However, I've always considered her to be my teaching soulmate because there are so many things about pedagogy and teaching that she and I and Roger all have in common. So welcome to Dr. Susan Keller Mather's presentation on the TIM model. Almost everybody in here probably had Sue at one time or another as a, for a professor, especially when you got to the project or the thesis part of your studies, but she also teaches other courses for the department, especially the ones that focus on teaching and training others. More than 3 decades now, she's an associate professor in our department and a true student-centered educator to the very core of her being. So it's definitely appropriate that Dr. Keller Mathers lead this mini C on certainly one of the most famous models of teaching and training. So Dr. Keller Mathers, take it away, my friend.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And I always appreciate David. He does wonders with technology and makes me look good. So I appreciate that. It's wonderful to see students, to see alumni, to see our colleagues in the field. A lot of expertise, a lot of Timmers in this audience. And I especially want to thank the people who have come in maybe for the first time, or maybe this is the second time that you've been to one of our events. This is for you. I want to introduce you to the TIM model and share this with our community as well. 11 countries represented. Now, if I don't name your country, please put it in the chat. We have the US, all over the US, Canada, Mexico, Colombia, the Netherlands, Qatar, India, South Africa, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Australia represented today. So that's amazing. If I missed a country, let me know. And it looks like I probably got them all. So I think next we'll talk about visualizing. So, that aha moment when it just comes to you. And think for a minute, visualize that for yourself. Sometime where you were working on something difficult or something really intriguing, you couldn't figure it out, and then the aha moment came. And I want to just share one of those with you. And that is, this was a journey of discovery for me over a period of many, many years. There was a time where I heightened my anticipation and I warmed up to learning about classic scholars in the field. And many of you know I just love history of creativity. And I've dug deep over years and years into these classic scholars that helped build the field. And so when I got a sabbatical this fall, I said, that's it. I'm going to focus on 11 classic scholars. I'm going to build materials. And I started working with something just intrigued me still. I was over at our library where we're going to have an innovation suite. And I'm looking at the work that's up on Alex Osborne, on Sidney Parnes. And I'm like, we need Ruth Noller to be more visible. It was an aha moment. And so I switched my sabbatical to focus on, love it, Raj, to focus on Ruth Noller. And that was a real aha for me. So if you had an aha moment, what was it about? just put it in the chat. Let's see if we can get a couple. What were you working on? What was it that just happened for you? Well, I see a couple hands going, so we'll give them a second to think about. Medical graduates using TIM. Create in a flash was an aha. And so was your book before that, where you woke up in the middle of the night, Raj, and had the idea for a book. But we know this all comes from preparation. When you're writing, it generally comes. Applied improvisation network, yes. So we're moving, we're thinking, but there's a preparation. We're doing deep thinking about something and there's missing elements. And that's key to Tim. So let's go to the next slide about Torrance and what he said about this model. Simple, but not so simple. Simple at first, but very deep in its application. It integrates creativity. So now we can teach for creativity while we teach for content. And Mary and I kind of summarized, Mary Murdoch and I summarized in an article what he said about the model and about teaching, actually. It's enhanced by non-authoritarian methods and approaches. It can be deliberately taught. It can be standalone, creativity can, or it can be integrated. And incubation is a basic mechanism of creative thinking that can be deliberately facilitated. So that was his contention, and there's more work in that area. The idea is if you set up for intrigue, if you set up for people to be involved and yet have the challenge of things that still need to be looked at, there's gaps. People will then continue the thinking beyond the time that you're together with them. So let's look at the diversity of the TIM designs. We can use this as a classroom lesson. And this was, some of you out there might have even been in this classroom. This was Dr. Cindy Burnett and I, team teaching Foundations of Creative Learning. And all the color sheets you see up there are a timeline. They're a timeline of the scholars. And you can see the rich visuals. Every color is a different decade. And so TIM is used to heighten, deepen, and extend the learning in this particular classroom lesson. It's also used for designing programs. So in this particular class, it's part of heightening anticipation or the warming up period. What are the first things you do in a graduate program in creativity and change leadership? Well, you learn about the foundations and you learn about creative problem solving. What do we do to dig deeper? Well, we go to 600 level courses, right? Current issues. We go to facilitating of creative problem solving and assessment of creativity. And what is the extending? What is the part where you are moving towards alumni? Well, that is the creativity and change leadership course. That is the teaching and training course in the creative problem solving strand. And that is a master's project, thesis, or comp exam. So a program could be designed to do these things. This presentation can be a design for Tim. Training can be a design. So my colleague, Tony Paglielli and I were working with a Department of Transportation in a different state. And we had engineers that needed to think about really innovative designs. And this happened to be for bridges. How do we get bridges to be put together quicker? So what do you do to engage engineers? Because they really need to think about things that weren't possible yet. You give them pipe cleaners, of course. That works with engineers. And so this was an example of a training designed that way, as many of you that are Timmers design using it, as well as conferences and workshops. So Kristen Peterson, for example, redeveloped the SIPSI springboard, integrating Tim as the design as well. So let me tell you about the history. It started as the incubation model of teaching and learning. As early as 1949, Torrance was interested in motivation and how to motivate people to learn. He was working in teaching a mental health class in Kansas State University. And so even back then, he knew there was a need for some kind of a design that would motivate. And so the beginnings of the incubation model started with the Begin Reading series, where they asked him to they asked him to put a creativity unit into it. But he knew if it's a separate entity within this reading series and social studies series, people aren't likely to do it because they're so busy doing the basics of the reading and social studies. So that's when he began to weave creativity into existing lessons. And in 79, he wrote the incubation model of teaching article for the Journal of Creative Behavior, where he outlined it. Now, his colleagues at the University of Georgia Torrance Center, his alumni from there, continue to work with this model. And fast forward to Mary Murdoch. Dr. Mary Murdoch came late 80s to Buffalo State University, and she's my teacher. She was Cindy's teacher and many other people's teacher. And she coined the term TIM. So she took his original model, and we wanted to be true to his model, yet make it more understandable and more accessible. And so that's where, again, I had another aha, and sitting on the floor, drew out the design that you see here on the right-hand side for the Torrance incubation model. So continuing his legacy, wanting to make sure that he is honored in this process as well. And that's why she called it the Torrance incubation model. One more piece of history let's look at. So integrating the skills. So Torrance had a set of skills based on longitudinal research and his observation and decades of practice and research in the search for Satorian creativity. And those 18 skills were identified. Frank Williams early on identified skills. In the thinking skills model of creative problem solving, they identified skills. And so my colleague, Cindy Burnett, took a set of 20 from all of those areas, given her expertise, looked at what would be a set of 20 skills that would be a good set for educators and trainers and anyone interested in using it to use to select from in the Torrance incubation model or to develop on their own. So Creativity in Education is her website, and I just love what she's done. I use it a lot, and she has videos for all of these. And so I use this set. I think this is a good set. So what have I done? I have set the purpose and the history of TIM. That's my content. And I have done it in visually rich way and asked you to visualize a bit too. So I've hit my content and my creativity topics here, and we have heightened anticipation. Next, we are going to take a deeper dive in looking at design of TIM, examples of TIM. That's my content. And again, I am weaving in the skill, one skill of visualizing it rich and colorfully in the deepening. And the extending, designing using TIM, that's still the content. And again, weaving in, visualizing it rich and colorfully. So if you look at the model here, I go into the learning with a topic and creativity goal. Notice the topic is larger. Creativity is in service of the content. Creativity should have one skill. Now, Torrance talked about having more than one skill, but in our practice for the last 20 years, we have found that you really need to stick to one to do it well. It's like anything else with learning. You put too many things in, and it may be there, but it's not a strong presence, nor is it repeated and practiced or articulated as well. So that's why we wanted to stick to one, and that's what we do when we design learning with this particular model. All right, so let's now take a look at the stages, and I'm going to let you read that yourself. And now I want to show you some work of a student. So we'll look at Melinda's work on the next slide. This is a unit of study, and this is for 3rd to 8th graders. And by the way, anything I'm showing you, I have permission from the authors to show this. And what she did in the heightening anticipation was warming them up with some drawing, basic skills in drawing. So she had 2 lessons that were part of the heightening anticipation. So this is an example of a unit. It's a 16-lesson unit in which she has warmed them up to organic and geometric shapes and drawing with shapes as part of the heightening anticipation. Now, each of these lessons is also designed with Tim, and this was an independent study. So let's go to deepening. So again, we'll take a look at Melinda's work. And in this, you can see that she has quite a few. This is the building blocks of cartoon creation. So really, really taught them about elements and principles of design and weaving in her creativity skill as well. Each one of these is part of the deepening about the bigger picture of her unit. And then each one is designed specifically using Tim as well. And you can see that there are all kinds of, from dialogue to humor and emotions and basic shapes, starting with basic shapes. But this all takes them deeper into this idea of elements and principles of design. So extending. So in the extending part, we'll take a look at what she did to make meaning and help the individuals take the learning beyond. So if we take a look at this in extending, we put it together and they had to create a comic strip or a comic book. They had to create their own characters. Now, I bet you, and I haven't asked Melinda this, I was texting with her yesterday. I bet if she met one of these students on the street, this would be memorable. This would be memorable. And it reminds me of when I used to teach freshmen and we taught the invention. And I used to tell them at the beginning of the course, do not drop this course because you have to do an invention. I will help you. You will be able to do it. And for years after that, I'd be walking around Buffalo and they'd go, hi, do you remember me? I invented the. For them, it made them understand they were creative. And so I'm sure that her students have the same kind of understanding. All right, so let me review this and then we're going to do a little playing together in a few minutes. So warming up happens before or at the beginning. It is creating interest. Sometimes even like the day before, tomorrow, we're going to look at such and such, or maybe it's an email that goes out or a video. Say, hey, if you get a chance, watch this before you come into class. Or Mary Murdoch and I once presented at the National Association of Gifted Children, and we had all kinds of things all the way down the hall, all the skills, all the way down. And our session was called Time is on Your Side. So we were playing Time is on Your Side as they came into the room. So our time was an expander because we took advantage of the before and at the beginning, those informal times. And we took advantage of extending by giving resources, by getting them intrigued enough that there were connections to be made, and we were helping them make the connections to go further. But it only works if the deepening happens. If you're not working on something that is complex enough and deep enough, you can still use Tim, and I do, and I think this session is a good example of it. We're not going really deep into it, but it will do that. It will allow for exploration and previously unknown information. And so all three of those. Now, we're going to stay here for a second. You have a task. Your task is, if you thought about a subject, and this is not just math reading, this could be driving a car or, cooking. If you thought about a subject that would really get your attention, if you saw it and you said, oh, wow, what's that? Think about it and let's put some in the chat. What might be some topics that when you looked at it, you go, whoa, that's intriguing. That's interesting. That's unusual. That gets my attention. That looks great. What are some of those topics? AI. Planning life on another planet. Ooh, spatial computing. Virtual reality. Science of cycling up. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure it's good. Are aliens real? I'm sensing a theme here. Curiosity. All right. I'd probably put down dogs because, I'm all about dogs. All right. So all motivating, energy, improv, creativity, conducting a job interview. Yeah. Especially if you're saying, okay, next week you have to go find a job because you've just graduated and this person is doing a session on job interviewing. It's timely. That's another way. Do all dogs go to heaven? They do. Performing as a musician. All right. So thank you. Thank you. Well, here, I'm going to, not yet, but in a minute, I'm going to reveal a topic that was a huge hit. It was such a huge hit that I asked this person who was a student at the time and a professor if she would please record this for me, because we were both like, who knew that this topic would have such interest? But again, timely, important to someone, and providing information that's new. So let's take a look at what that was. Are you guilty of tax evasion? Marcia Huber, who's an alumni, also worked in this area at the university, and she did this wonderfully playful, now this is US based tax codes. And she did this wonderful, I've given you the whole thing in case when you get the video, you want to go back and read it all. Yeah, we'll make sure that you get the recording so that you can look at this. I'll give you the slides. And she gave him a quiz. So for example, if you had a garage sale and collected $300, is that taxable? What do you think? Nod your head up and down or no? Yes, no? Yeah? Yeah. Kristen, you can't. I already told you this answer. The answer is no, because it's something you already paid for. I didn't know. All this time I wasn't collecting tax. So interesting. She took them deep into what the tax codes are. And then she had them take the test again and to see if they were guilty of tax evasion. And of course, these are the little things that we don't know that, so I think everybody was very intrigued with this. And she did combine and synthesize as her skill throughout. So her particular, this particular lesson, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, was a 10-minute session. And what we know now is you can do a lot in a little bit of time. We always think we need more time. No, you can do a lot in a little bit of time. And so hers was particularly good. And again, I gave you the whole thing, and I realized putting this much information on a slide is a no-no. But since I'm a university professor, that's what we do. Can't help ourselves. That's the way we go. That's the way we go. So we're going to get into groups in a minute. But first, I want to give you a couple things. Empathy and creativity. Yeah. I'm going to give you a couple of resources here. I'm going to give you this, which is the Torrance Incubation Model interview, Matthew Werwood. This was part of a documentary, and it's about I don't know, 5 minutes long or so, where I talk about the Torrance incubation model. Also a podcast with my friends, Matthew Warwood and Cindy Burnett, and also a short video on the Torrance incubation model. And then I gave you Cindy's creativity and education so that you have that. And I also have permission to share with you a newsletter. Mary Murdoch and I wrote this quite a while ago, but it was a nice overview of the Torrance incubation model for the National Association of Gifted Children's Conference. So I'll give you a minute to get that, and then we're going to play around in groups. And I'll tell you what you're going to do. So I'll give you a second to go ahead and get that. And so if you think about how you might use this model, you might, those of you that are trainers, those of you that are teachers, those of you that present on a regular basis, I've had people use it with families, you know, when you want to help someone dig deeper into a subject. And so we'll give you a little bit of time here to, how's it going, David? Do we have groups?
Yes, we do, Sue. We're ready to send them to 3-person groups.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you about 10 minutes to say hello to some friends randomly and to think about how you might use this or how you have used this, because there is a lot of expertise in here. And then we will come back and share some. So we'll send you off to your groups and we'll see you in 10 minutes. How have you used this? And David, can we pause let's see where I can pause it. Maybe I can. I don't know. Go ahead. How have you used Tim, or how might you use it?
So when I was first introduced to Tim in 560, at the time I was running the Creative Problem Solving Institute. So I implemented how we taught not just the overall conference, the marketing of the conference, it's how we taught the core classes, and we shared the information with all presenters, encouraging everyone to use Tim. But for me, it's any workshop I do now always is with the Tim model. That's just a given. And it's certainly easy in creativity to start with, you know, make it bright and colorful, make it ring, make it sing. Those are already kind of baked into the content. So the fun thing is to pick some of the skills that are a little bit less obvious for creativity and sometimes challenge yourself to do something different.
Lots of skills, lots of skills. I talked about putting it into context is what I used when in parts of that course with the foundational thinkers, because, you know, we need to know what was going on during the 1950s in the field of creativity and around the world that affected what was going on in the field of creativity. So put it into context was best. Okay. Katie, you mind sharing? All the way from Australia. Thanks for coming in.
No problem. I wouldn't have missed it. I'm just thinking back to I'm doing the masters. I'm just about to complete the masters, and back in 560, I think Sue, you'll remember the wild disco Dan lesson that we designed. So I, with a couple of other colleagues, other teachers, we designed. I believe we were examining plan for action in the creative problem solving process. And so we designed this lesson around helping Disco Dan to work out how he was going to get planning permission in the local community to run this disco. And he came up against these problems. And so I would say with Tim, the actual planning and the collaboration was a really important first part before we actually designed the thing. So that was a really that was powerful. And then the actual planning of itself was a plan for action class, and it was I can't remember the specific creativity skill that we used, but it was very rich and colorful, and there was dancing involved. And
make it ring, make it swing.
Yeah, make it ring, make it sing. That's right. But it was serious as well, because we was trying to solve a problem for Disco Dan, who didn't know how he was going to get permission. That's right, he got shut down, so we had to find another venue, and so it was how he went about that process to actually get Disco Dan back up and running. Yeah. So sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded explanation.
It was brilliant. It was
It
hysterical.
was fun.
It's so much fun. We're looking at learning that's, joyful. That, you can dig into something complex and not easy to understand or be able to take to the next level, and make it in a safe environment that brings a lot of your thinking together. I used it for my doctoral dissertation on extraordinary women of creative accomplishment. Do you know how much data I had? Oh my, I'm sitting there with this data, but I knew I was in deep water. I was in the deepening part of this model, and I knew that I could get out of a locked door. That's one of the metaphors they use for the strategies. I knew that eventually it would come together, but I also knew I was at a place that was very difficult. But understanding that model helped me say, well, at least I know where I am in the creative process. And now I can move forward. Who else would like to share? All right. I would love for you to share what you did in your master's project in the School of Creative Thinking, our partners in the Netherlands.
Okay, since we have some trainers who are masters in science of creativity and change leadership, all our training programs are based on TIM, but we don't, so all the workshops, all the things, we always use the very deliberately say, okay, this is heightening anticipation, this is deepening the learning, and then we have to do some extending the learning. So since the content is creativity, it's not always specific, okay, this is the creative skill. But Eric, another alumnus, he designed one of the programs, and we're still using that. He designed it during a course of U2. And for my master's project, I combined, because we didn't have had the pandemic then, so but I thought it will be more, everything will be more online in the future. So I combined TIM with how do you call it, from ECFL, the dimensions of a creative and I combined them, and I thought, how can you make an online session creative and very engaging? So I combined the two elements with TIM, and then I use TIM, and I love it.
Well, we all have Paul Torrance and his 60 years of research to thank for putting that together. So maybe time for one more if there's someone else that'd like to share. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, you can unmute.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Anuradha from India. Hi.
Welcome.
So, hello everyone, and hello Dr. Yates, one of my mentors. Both my mentors are here, Susan ma'am and William sir. So I would like to share here that I had used this TIM model in one of my projects. That is when I was studying under CRS 670, and I was doing it under Yates sir. And there we had presented along with my partner, that is Hannah, and we had presented about how we are using the TIM model in one of the module which we designed, and the name was personification of the medicines. We use the personification as the module. So that is one example. Another thing is I am using the TIM module in medical classrooms. So for example, like today only I had a lecture on gastric acidity, how to treat acid dyspepsia. So initially when we start the class, we start with this heightening of the anticipation, like a set induction. So in that, usually what I do, I show them a lot of visuals of, patients suffering with acid dyspepsia. And then there are some questions. I just ask them that, what do you see here? And I even ask them, have you ever suffered from acidity? How do you feel when you suffer from acid? So these are a list of questions. And that usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes when I'm doing that. Now, after that, we go into the content, and then when they have to, deepen that learning process, I give them a lot of activities, group activities. So in those group activities, we have the floating faculties and myself, wherein we help them reach the diagnosis and the medicines which are to be given. And then after that, ending the session is like, have they found any problems with their patients? If yes, would they want to design some innovative product out for the patients? So this is what I have been doing. But today I wanted to be a part of this session because ma'am is herself conducting this session, and I've heard a lot of her interviews and everything. And I'm really impressed, and I really want to learn more about this, like the how to go about it meticulously. So that is what I want to learn today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. See, you can use it on any topic. These really complex acids and gas and questioning to get, because you've got to set the purpose and motivation up front, or your learners aren't with you, right? So David, I'd like to go back to one slide, and that's the one, it's fourth from the end, that has the 3 stages. And I just want to end with that. If we can go back, can you go back to it? Right. Yes. Thank you. So, and then once we do this, we're going to share with you some upcoming events as well. So, so again, the warming up happens before or at the beginning, and there's something that creates interest and purpose. So in this model, now I've given you here the more complex model. And these were Torrance's colleagues that came up with the metaphor. So there's strategies for heightening anticipation, and those strategies are listed there. Not that I could read them because they're so small, but there are strategies to set the purpose, get the attention, and you don't use them all, but you can go back once you've designed your presentation or workshop, or you can go back and say, did I heighten anticipation? Did I get one of these strategies? And when in the deepening, did I then have some kind of interaction, exploration, connecting to previously unknown information? And interaction can be, in groups, or it could just be interaction between them and the material. So there's a broad way that can occur, but there's some kind of, you are learning about something that you didn't know before, and you are finding that there's gaps. If it's something that's easy, it's like with creative problem solving. Don't get a whole group together and do creative problem solving on something that can just be done easily. It's rote, or it's, here's the answer. You use this when you need more powerful thinking. And then the extending, engaging in some ways that it's meaningful. So for example, I love the metaphor, sing in one's own key. What does this mean for you? How are you going to use this in the future? So I introduced this to one of my classes, and then I reminded them at the end, oh, by the way, you are designing your 10-minute presentation on your future related to the creative learning in our 7th class. So this material is going to be taken forward naturally because they're going to use it. And so that helped them bring that together. And before I go anywhere else, are there any questions? You guys are the best.
This was fantastic, Sue. Thank you. Thank you
Oh.
so much.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
thrilled to bring it. When I looked at the audience and went, I've got a bunch of Timmers in the audience. They're experts. And I have people that are learning it for the first time. This is a great challenge.
Thank you. This is great.
So stay with us if you would. We have a couple announcements to make. Our next mini C will be April 18th at 6 p.m. Dr. Gerard Puccio. And just to continue the heightening anticipation, we're not going to tell you the topic. We're just going to wait a little while and we'll eventually, because there's a couple topics in the works and it depends what happens between now and then. So hang on, April 18th at 6 p.m. and we'll send out an Eventbrite. So for those of you who might be interested in the micro credentials, now for those of you that graduated quite a while ago, we didn't have micro credentials and now we do. Applied Thinking and Problem Solving is our first 2 creative problem solving courses. And you get a micro credential as you are journeying towards your certificate in creativity and change leadership, which is 18 credit hours. And then the Masters of Science in Creativity and Change Leadership, of course, is 33 credit hours. And we have a creative education micro credential, which is 4 courses. So anybody wants more information on that, let us know. We're happy to share more about that. And those people that are in this session that are graduates, they are a wonderful group of people who would always be willing to talk to you about our program. All right. And what's coming up? February 29th and March 1st is our Creativity Expert Exchange. It will be virtual. We have amazing keynotes on creativity and mood and creativity from curriculum to practice. And Melody is our new professor. We're so excited to have her with us on faculty. And our graduate program information session is March 22nd for anyone that might be interested. So pass it on, pass it on. You guys are our biggest cheerleaders, are those that have taken the program. And Dr. Ruth Noller celebration. I changed my sabbatical to focus on Ruth because I saw the need to have Ruth and her story come out. So March 13th, now that's the start of our Day of Giving at the college. And we're raising funds for the Innovation Center because, of course, chairs are expensive. And there's a mentoring component to it. And there's a facilitation room. And it's a small business incubator and all these cool things. So we said, well, you know what? We should dedicate this year to Ruth Noller for that, for Day of Giving. So I've been doing interviews of Ruth Noller's students who graduated from our program. And I'm going to pull some of the bits from that and have it and do a little virtual session on Ruth on March 13th. May 24th, we are having an on-campus celebration of Ruth Noller at 6 p.m. And that's going to be a big event where we get to see the materials that I'm developing as part of the sabbatical and a grant from the Faculty Student Association. And we'll just have a great time. So hope you can make some of those. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and I hope to see you at the next one. If anybody has questions or wants to hang out, we can stay for a few minutes. Thank you. And David, if you can stop the